can see me here. Ooh, hi. It's Friday afternoon, but I think where you are watching this is probably maybe Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Depends. I'm going to take you through the next section of African Notes, and that has to do with religion and the slave trade. So I'm going to go back to the Google Doc. It's right here. And we're going to be talking first about religion and then about the slave trade. And for the first question, why was religion important to people in African societies? Really, we could probably delete the word African from this question, because religion is important in all societies. And so the reason why it's different in Africa is not really different to any other group of people or any other continent or region. Religion, as you know from our first unit, religion helps to unite societies, and also people. If I could spell today, societies. People understand their origins through religion. So if you think about, for example, a creation story in Christianity, Christians believe that God created the world, and that God created man and woman, and also the animals. And so if you are a Christian, then you understand your origin through that story. And the same is true in Africa. And most of the indigenous religious practices were called animistic. And so I've looked this up on Google, animism, and I'll let you read this for a second. So it might sound to you pretty similar to the Aboriginal belief system, that everything has something spiritual in it, every living thing. So even non-human entities have some kind of something spiritual in them. And having traveled to South Africa when I was there, I was pretty amazed at how spiritual their world is. Whereas when we go through our day, it seems that we're not thinking about spirits being all around us. But in Africa, and not all Africa, but where I was in South Africa, there was a lot of a belief in the spiritual realm just in everyday functioning. So it was just an interesting perspective. So there's this deep connection between the spiritual and the physical worlds. So if you want to know more about that, you can look it up. We'll go back to our notes here. So what role did this is loading down here, so it might pop up in a second. What role did oral traditions and myths play in society? So again, oral traditions are, oral means mouth, so spoken traditions, and myths, so stories or folk tales, things like that. So oral traditions and myths, they teach important moral truths about right and wrong. So you probably remember this concept from learning about arts and literature, and how folk tales can really tell us a lot about a culture and what they believe. So, for example, the tortoise and the hare would tell us that slow and steady win the race, or Peter and the wolf would tell us, or not Peter and the wolf. Peter and the wolf? Yeah, I guess so. Where he cries wolf 3 times and no one believes him, and it tells you not to lie or not to be silly when that's inappropriate. So we can learn a lot about our culture from folk tales, and you could do that for any culture. What kinds of stories are they telling, and what do those stories mean, and why are they significant? Okay, so what else did Africans use as a part of their religious celebration? And I'm going to change this from Africans to many indigenous, again, spelling. What else did many indigenous groups use as a part of their religious celebration? So, again, we don't want to stereotype or say that all people in all places in the whole continent did act a certain way or believe a certain thing, but we are generalizing. There are some similarities in many of the indigenous groups, and so that's what we're doing. Certainly there were people and groups of people who were different from this. So you just want to be careful when we're talking about a continent or a region in the way that we say that all people were like this. So there's also dancing, singing, and musical instruments. So far, we're not seeing anything really crazy here. We've got religion helps unite societies. People understand their origins through religion. Many people in any culture would say that's true. Oral traditions are teaching moral truths about right and wrong. Again, pretty similar. So, and also dancing, singing, and musical instruments. If you go to any worship service in almost any religion, you will see these things. So think about, if you go to church on Sunday or you go to synagogue on Saturday, do you see these things in your worship, in your religious belief system? So we're going to realize that there's a lot of similarities between many different religions, but we haven't talked anything about what they actually believe. So when we talk about animism, there's more than one God. So that would be what kind of religion? I hope you just said polytheism. So yes, polytheistic. So there's not just one God, but there is one supreme being who created the world, but there's also lesser gods. So since the supreme being is seen as distant from everyday life, many people turn to lesser gods for daily desires, issues, functions, etc. So they see the supreme being as the creator of the world, but not someone who plays a role in their everyday life. So for their everyday life, like growing a crop if they're agricultural, or herding animals if they're herders, they would have gods that would be in charge of those specific everyday functions. So also, when I went to South Africa, we visited a graveyard, and one thing that was really interesting about the graveyard is that on top of the graves were all these just stuff, like things, pictures and, just items, household items, cups, forks, dishes, clothes, just everyday things, because there's this, in many animistic beliefs, there's this idea that ancestors are not gone, that there's a connection between the dead and the living. And so many of these religions believe that ancestors can help or harm them. So it is important to perform rituals to honor and please them. So if your ancestor can harm you, you want to make sure that your dead relative is doing okay up there, wherever they are. So you want to make sure that they're taken care of, they have everything they need, so that you are going to be okay. So you can see that in the burial, in the way that they have buried and what kinds of rituals they still performed, even after they were dead. Whereas we kind of have like cemeteries, you leave them alone, maybe go visit every once in a while, but these are really kind of active places. So pretty interesting. And we're going to again change the word Africans to most indigenous groups, or many, maybe, many. So how do they feel about nature and objects on Earth? And that goes back to animism and this connection between the spiritual and earthly. And they believe that every object is filled with a living spirit, because they believe Supreme Being created all things. Boom. Okay. The role of diviners and healers. Now, these are people, diviners and healers are people who are not quite divine, literally like God or actual gods, but not quite just regular mortal human beings. There's a little bit of an in-between. So they're the connection between the spiritual realm and the earthly realm. So diviners play this role, diviners, where they are interpreters between the people and the divine world. And they might explain the cause of misfortune. Sorry my typing is so loud. It's kind of clicky here. And then the healer, might be a person in the community, would seek the cause of an illness. And they would say that they would help the family become aware root cause. Okay, so there's similar ideas here. Okay, so the diviners would say that you know, your misfortune is a result of something you're doing that's bad or wrong. And healers, if you're sick, if you're ill, and they would say, well, young lady, have you been nice to your siblings today? Have you helped your mother and father around the house? No? Well, that's probably the reason you have this cough. Okay, that's an example I just made up. So, but they would say that, you know, the reason why bad things are happening to you, the reason why your dog died or you're sick would be because of something you're doing, and so they would try to heal that. Okay, so Christianity and Judaism. Christianity spread to North Africa and up the Nile. Now, Ethiopia has an interesting history with Christianity in that they always had Christian communities. As far back, there wasn't really a conversion. There were always Christians in Ethiopia, and so it spreads up the Nile, and then Judaism arrives in Ethiopia from across the Red Sea. And so there's a connection between people traveling from the Middle East, Israel, Bethlehem. They're traveling to Africa for trade or for other reasons, and Christianity comes to Africa, and Judaism comes to Africa. Islam comes to Africa in similar ways. Oops. Islam comes in AD 800. Muslim traders spread Islam to parts of Africa, and it gradually spreads. So if your region is North Africa, you'll notice that there's a lot of Muslim influence up there. And so you might have heard the word Muslim and Islam and you're not sure of the differences. Well, Islam is the name of the religion, and Muslim is a term that describes people who practice Islam. So if you say Christianity and Christians, that's the same thing as saying Islam and Muslims, or Judaism and Jews, Islam and Muslims. Okay, so it's a different word, which makes it a little bit confusing, but that's how to explain it. Okay, jihad literally means holy war, and it was used to purify Islam. After leaders thought Islamic teachings have been corrupted. So there's a lot to say about the history of Islam and the history of Judaism and Christianity, but that's not what we're going to get into in this study of Africa. We're going to focus more on sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so in chapter, well, actually, we're going to stop there for right now. We're going to stop right there. That's the end of section 2, African religions and the slave trade. And we're going to get into the slave trade more in section 3. Okay, bye.